Isn't marriage about time together, Hudson? Or does your new promotion mean our vows expire at midnight? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing unease in my stomach. Hudson glanced up from his laptop, his brow furrowed. Carice, you know it's just a busy period at work. This promotion is a big deal, and I need to prove myself. By neglecting your wife? I countered, feeling the sting of his absence more acutely with each passing day. We barely see each other anymore, and when we do, you're glued to that screen. He sighed, rubbing his temples. I'm sorry, honey. It won't be like this forever. Once I get through this initial phase, things will settle down. I promise. I wanted to believe him, but the nagging doubts persisted. Hudson had always been ambitious, but his recent detachment felt different, more pronounced. A part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something else was at play. All right, I conceded, forcing a small smile. But don't forget about us, okay? We're supposed to be a team. He reached out and squeezed my hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through me. You're right. I'll make it up to you, I swear. As I gazed into his eyes, searching for the reassurance I craved, a flicker of uncertainty remained. Was I overthinking things, or was my husband slowly slipping away, consumed by forces beyond my comprehension? The next evening, I found myself at one of Hudson's company parties, surrounded by the usual suspects, colleagues, investors, and their respective partners. I plastered on a smile, making small talk while scanning the room for Hudson. That's when I overheard a hushed conversation between two women I recognized from previous events. Did you hear about Hudson's little rendezvous with Janine? Apparently, they've been getting cozy lately. My heart skipped a beat as the implications sank in. Janine was one of Hudson's direct reports, a young, ambitious woman always eager to please. You're kidding, the other woman gasped. But what about his wife? The first woman shrugged. I guess the thrill of the promotion was too much to resist. My world tilted on its axis as their words burrowed deep, fueling a suspicion I had desperately tried to ignore. Was Hudson really capable of such betrayal? In that moment, I knew I couldn't blindly trust his reassurances any longer. If there was truth to the rumors, I needed to uncover it, no matter how painful the revelations might be. After the party, I found myself unable to shake the uneasy feeling that had taken root. The rumor about Hudson's potential infidelity gnawed at me, breeding doubts that threatened to consume my every waking thought. I needed answers, but confronting Hudson directly could backfire spectacularly if my fears proved unfounded. No, I needed a more discreet approach, someone on the inside who could shed light on the situation without arousing suspicion. That's when I remembered Olivia, an old friend from college who had landed a job at the same tech firm a few years back. We hadn't spoken much lately, our lives having drifted apart, but perhaps she could provide the insight I so desperately craved. I sent her a casual text, suggesting we catch up over coffee, and to my relief, she eagerly agreed. A few days later, we found ourselves seated at a cozy cafe reminiscing about old times. It's been too long, Olivia remarked, sipping her latte. How have you been? How's Hudson? I forced a smile, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been concerned lately. Olivia's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Taking a deep breath, I recounted the rumors I'd overheard at the party, my voice wavering ever so slightly. There were whispers about Hudson being involved with someone named Janine. Do you know anything about that? Olivia's eyes widened, and she glanced around furtively before leaning in closer. Carice, I'm so sorry, but those rumors, they might have some truth to them. My heart sank as her words washed over me, confirming my worst fears. What do you know? I pressed, needing every detail, no matter how excruciating. Janine and Hudson have been spending a lot of time together lately, working late nights and attending client meetings alone, Olivia explained, her voice laced with sympathy. People have seen them getting a little too close for comfort, if you know what I mean. I nodded, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill forth. And his promotion? Was any of that earned legitimately? Olivia hesitated, her expression grave. From what I've heard, he may have cut some corners, played a few underhanded games to get ahead, but I don't know all the details. In that moment, a wave of anger and betrayal washed over me, fueled by the realization that the man I had devoted myself to was capable of such deceit. Hudson had not only broken our sacred vows but had also compromised his integrity for personal gain. "Thank you for being honest with me," I managed, my voice trembling. I need to process all this." Olivia reached across the table, squeezing my hand reassuringly. "I'm here for you, Carys. Whatever you decide to do, I've got your back." As I left the cafe, my mind whirled with a torrent of emotions: disbelief, rage, and a burning desire for retribution. Hudson had shattered the trust that formed the bedrock of our marriage, and for that, he would face consequences. I knew then that I couldn't simply confront him directly. He would undoubtedly deny everything and attempt to gaslight me. No, I needed a more strategic approach, what would expose his misdeeds beyond any doubt and bring his carefully constructed facade crumbling down around him. And I knew just the person who could help me orchestrate my revenge. After my conversation with Olivia, I found myself consumed by a burning desire for justice. Hudson's betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined, and the thought of him carrying on his deceitful ways filled me with a rage I had never known before. I needed a plan, a way to gather irrefutable evidence of his misdeeds and expose him for the fraud he truly was. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed an ally, someone who could help me navigate the treacherous waters ahead. That's when I reached out to my brother, Grant. We had always been close, and I knew I could trust him implicitly. When I explained the situation, his reaction was one of shock and fury. "That son of a bitch," Grant growled, his fists clenched. "How dare he do this to you, Carys? You don't deserve any of this." I nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. "I know, but I need your help to make things right. I can't let him get away with this." Grant's expression hardened, his eyes burning with determination. "Whatever you need, sis. I'm with you every step of the way." Over the next few weeks, Grant and I worked tirelessly, gathering evidence of Hudson's duplicity. Olivia provided us with insider information, helping us piece together the puzzle of his deceit. We uncovered incriminating emails, financial records, and even photographic evidence of Hudson's affair with Janine. The more we dug, the clearer it became that his promotion was built on a foundation of lies and underhanded tactics. "Look at this," Grant exclaimed one night, thrusting a stack of documents in my face. "He falsified expense reports, embezzled funds from the company. This guy is a criminal, Carys." I felt sick to my stomach as I pored over the damning evidence, but a part of me couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. Finally, I had the ammunition I needed to bring Hudson's world crashing down around him. As the days passed, I found myself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. Anger and hurt warred with a lingering sense of love for the man I had once vowed to cherish. But his actions had shattered that bond, and I knew there was no turning back. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Grant asked one evening, his voice laced with concern. "This is going to get ugly, Carys? Are you prepared for the fallout?" I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. He made his choices, Grant, and now it's time for him to face the consequences. The plan was set in motion, and there was no turning back. Hudson had sown the seeds of his own destruction, and I was determined to reap the bitter harvest. A part of me still held out hope that he might come clean, that he might show some semblance of remorse and save what little was left of our fractured relationship. But deep down, I knew better. As I waited for the perfect moment to strike, to unleash the storm of retribution upon my unsuspecting husband, I couldn't help but wonder if a part of me had been irrevocably changed. The betrayal had left scars, hardening my heart and fueling a thirst for vengeance that terrified me. But there was no going back now. Hudson had made his choices, and it was time for him to face the consequences, no matter how ugly or painful they might be. With Grant's unwavering support and Olivia's insider knowledge, our mission to gather evidence against Hudson intensified. We were like detectives on a case, leaving no stone unturned in our quest to expose his web of lies. Grant had connections in the tech industry, and he leveraged them to gain access to confidential records and communications. Late nights were spent poring over financial statements, email threads, and surveillance footage, piecing together the intricate puzzle of Hudson's deception. "Look at this," Grant said one evening, his eyes fixed on the computer screen. "He's been siphoning funds from the company into offshore accounts for months." I felt a sickening twist in my gut as the realization sank in. Not only had Hudson betrayed our marriage vows, but he had also compromised his integrity and broken the law in pursuit of his ambitions. "That bastard," I muttered through gritted teeth. "He's going to pay for this, Grant. I swear it." Grant's expression hardened, his jaw set in determination. "We'll make sure of it, sis. He won't get away with this." As the days passed, the evidence mounted, painting a damning portrait of Hudson's misdeeds. Illicit affairs, financial fraud, insider trading. It seemed there was no line he wasn't willing to cross in his pursuit of power and success. And yet, despite the overwhelming proof of his wrongdoing, a part of me still held out a glimmer of hope that perhaps, deep down, there was some justification for his actions, some explanation that could somehow make sense of the chaos he had unleashed upon our lives. But every time I entertained that notion, the memories of his lies and betrayal came flooding back, extinguishing any lingering sympathy I might have harbored. "He's a monster, Carys," Grant said one night, his voice thick with disgust. "A selfish, lying monster who doesn't deserve a shred of your compassion." I knew he was right, but still, a part of me struggled with the weight of the decision that lay ahead. To expose Hudson's misdeeds would be to set in motion a series of events that could very well destroy him, professionally, financially, and perhaps even legally. Was I prepared to go that far? To unleash a storm of retribution that could potentially consume not only him, but also those caught in its wake? As I wrestled with these questions, Grant's voice cut through my thoughts. "Carys, look at me." I met his gaze, drawn in by the intensity in his eyes. "You didn't ask for any of this," he continued. "Hudson made his choices, and now he has to face the consequences. Don't let your compassion blind you to the reality of what he's done." His words struck a chord deep within me, resonating with a truth I had been grappling with for too long. Hudson had brought this upon himself, and it was time for me to stop making excuses for his inexcusable actions. With renewed determination, I nodded, steeling my resolve. "You're right, Grant. It's time to end this, once and for all." The planning continued, each piece of evidence meticulously catalogued and organized, building an ironclad case against the man I'd once loved. As the final pieces fell into place, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet satisfaction. Hudson had chosen his path, and now it was time for me to choose mine, a path that would lead to the reckoning he so richly deserved. With the weight of Hudson's betrayal bearing down on me, I knew the time had come to confront him directly. I had to give him one last chance to come clean, to acknowledge the depth of his deceit, and perhaps salvage what little remained of our shattered relationship. Grant was adamant that I should proceed with caution, fearing Hudson's potential for volatility when backed into a corner. But I was resolute in my decision. I needed to look into his eyes and see if there was even a flicker of remorse, a glimmer of the man I had once loved. I arranged for us to meet at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground where we could have a candid discussion away from prying eyes. As I sat waiting, my heart pounded in my chest, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within me. When Hudson finally arrived, his expression was one of confusion and mild annoyance. "What's this all about, Carys?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from me. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. "Hudson, we need to talk about what's been going on." He tensed, his body language defensive. "What do you mean?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder filled with the damning evidence we had gathered, emails, financial records, even photographs. "I know about the affairs, Hudson. I know about the fraud and the embezzlement." His eyes widened as he took in the stack of incriminating documents before him. For a moment he seemed caught off guard, but then his expression hardened, and a cruel smirk tugged at the corners of his mouth. "So, you've been doing a little digging, have you?" he sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. "Bravo, Carys. Bravo." I felt my blood boil at his dismissive attitude, but I forced myself to remain calm. "This is your chance to come clean, Hudson, to tell the truth, and maybe, just maybe, salvage what's left of our marriage." He let out a harsh laugh, his eyes cold and utterly devoid of remorse. "Come clean? Why the hell would I do that? I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let a little thing like you ruin everything I've built." His words cut like a knife, laying bare the depths of his selfishness and depravity. In that moment, I realized that the man I had loved was gone, consumed by his own twisted ambition and greed. "You're a monster," I spat, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "A lying, cheating monster who doesn't deserve a shred of loyalty or love." Hudson leaned back in his seat, a smug grin plastered across his face. "Call me what you want, Carys, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who's going to come out on top. You think your little stunt here is going to stop me? Think again." As he rose to leave, he fixed me with a cold, calculating stare. "You had your chance to play nice, but you blew it. Now you're going to find out just how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine." With those chilling words, he turned and strode out of the cafe, leaving me shaken to my core. In that moment, I knew that any lingering hope of reconciliation was gone, replaced by a burning desire to see Hudson pay for his crimes. The gloves were off and the battle lines had been drawn. Hudson had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. A choice that would either see me emerge victorious or be consumed by the fires of his wrath. As I sat there, clutching the damning evidence in my trembling hands, I realized that there was no turning back. The path ahead would be fraught with pain and retribution, but it was a journey I was prepared to undertake, no matter the cost. Hudson's downfall was inevitable, and I would be the one to orchestrate his demise, even if it meant sacrificing a part of my own soul in the process. After Hudson's defiant reaction and veiled threats, I knew there was no turning back. The time for diplomacy had passed, and the only path forward was to bring his misdeeds into the harsh light of day, exposing his carefully cultivated facade for the world to see. Grant and I meticulously planned our next move, scrutinizing every detail and anticipating every potential obstacle. We couldn't afford any missteps. This was our one chance to strike a decisive blow and ensure Hudson's downfall. The opportunity presented itself in the form of a major company event, a lavish gala attended by executives, investors, and industry bigwigs. It was the perfect stage for our grand unveiling, and we were determined to make it a spectacle Hudson would never forget. As the evening unfolded, I watched him work the room, charming and schmoozing his way through the crowd with practiced ease. It made my stomach churn to see him so effortlessly maintain his charade, all while the weight of his deceit threatened to crush him. When the time came for the speeches and presentations, I caught Grant's eye from across the room. He gave me a subtle nod, and I knew it was now or never. With my heart pounding in my chest, I made my way to the podium, clutching the folder containing the damning evidence against Hudson. The room fell silent as I took the stage, all eyes fixed upon me. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I'm sure many of you are wondering why I've interrupted this gala, but I assure you it's for a matter of grave importance." Hudson's face had drained of color, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and fear. I fixed him with a steely gaze, determined to hold his attention as I methodically laid out the details of his misdeeds. "For years, my husband Hudson has been engaged in a pattern of deceit and corruption," I declared, pulling out the first piece of evidence, a printout of an incriminating email exchange. "He has been carrying on multiple affairs, including one with his direct report, Janine." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as I continued, each revelation more damning than the last. Financial fraud, embezzlement, insider trading. No stone was left unturned as I methodically dismantled Hudson's carefully constructed facade. Throughout it all, Hudson remained frozen in place, his face contorted in a mask of rage and disbelief. When I finally fell silent, the room was engulfed in a deafening silence, punctuated only by the occasional gasp or whispered exclamation. Then Hudson found his voice. "You lying bitch," he snarled, his composure crumbling. "You think you can just waltz in here and ruin everything I've built? You're delusional." But his protestations fell on deaf ears as I produced the final piece of evidence, a damning video recording that captured his misdeeds in vivid detail. As the footage played out on the massive screens flanking the stage, Hudson's face drained of color, and he sank back into his chair, utterly defeated. In that moment, I knew I had won. Hudson's carefully constructed empire had come crashing down around him, his lies and betrayals laid bare for all to see. As security escorted him from the premises, his eyes met mine one final time, and I saw a flicker of something I hadn't expected: regret. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. In the aftermath of the explosive revelation, the fallout was swift and severe. Hudson was promptly fired, and legal proceedings were soon underway, threatening to strip him of everything he had so ruthlessly acquired. As for me, I felt a strange sense of catharsis, tempered by a lingering sadness for the man I had once loved. But ultimately, I knew I had done the right thing, not just for myself, but for all those he had wronged in his relentless pursuit of power and success. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could breathe a little easier, secure in the knowledge that justice had been served. In the aftermath of Hudson's public downfall, the wheels of justice continued to turn with relentless momentum. With the evidence I had painstakingly gathered, the authorities wasted no time in building a case against him, leaving him little choice but to face the consequences of his actions. As the legal proceedings unfolded, I found myself embroiled in another battle, the battle for our shared assets and the life we had built together. Hudson, desperate to salvage what little he could, fought tooth and nail to maintain control, but I was determined not to let him walk away unscathed. "He's going to try and bury you in paperwork and legal jargon," Grant warned me one afternoon as we strategized our next move. "But we've got the upper hand here, Carys. Don't let him intimidate you." With Grant's guidance and the support of a formidable legal team, I navigated the treacherous waters of the divorce proceedings, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontations with Hudson. True to form, he resorted to every dirty trick in the book, attempting to gaslight and manipulate me at every turn. "Carys, please," he pleaded during one particularly heated exchange. "You know I never meant to hurt you. It was all just a misunderstanding. We can work through this." I fixed him with a withering glare, utterly unmoved by his hollow words. "Save your breath, Hudson. The only thing I want from you is a fair settlement. Nothing more, nothing less." His facade crumbled, and the true depths of his rage and bitterness were laid bare. "You think you've won, don't you?" he snarled, his eyes burning with hatred. "Well, you're wrong. I'll make sure you pay for this, one way or another." But his threats rang hollow, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control. With the weight of evidence stacked against him, Hudson had no choice but to accept the terms of the divorce, which stripped him of a significant portion of his ill-gotten wealth. As the final papers were signed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction wash over me. Hudson had been brought to his knees, his once towering ambitions reduced to rubble by his own hubris and deceit. In the weeks and months that followed, I turned my attention to rebuilding my life, surrounding myself with the unwavering support of Grant, Olivia, and those who had stood by me through the darkest of times. Hudson, on the other hand, found himself adrift, his professional and personal life in tatters. Whispers of his misdeeds spread like wildfire, making him a pariah in the very circles he had once coveted. On occasion he would reach out, his messages dripping with desperation and remorse. "Carys, please, you have to forgive me," he begged in one email. "I was a fool, and I've lost everything that matters. Give me one more chance, I'm begging you." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The wounds he had inflicted ran too deep, and the man I had once loved was little more than a distant memory, eclipsed by the monster he had become. As I forged ahead, building a new life on my own terms, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this point. The betrayal, the pain, the burning desire for vengeance, it had all been a crucible, forging me into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. And while the scars of Hudson's deception would never fully heal, I took solace in the knowledge that I had emerged victorious, my integrity and self-worth intact. As for Hudson, he would forever be a cautionary tale, a reminder of the insidious nature of unchecked ambition and the consequences that awaited those who dared to cross the lines of loyalty and trust. In the end, the sweet taste of retribution was tempered by a lingering bitterness, but I knew that I had done what was necessary to reclaim my life and my dignity, and for that I had no regrets. With divorce finalized and Hudson's machinations laid bare, I found myself at a crossroads. The life I had once known was gone, replaced by the harsh realities of his betrayal and the aftermath of my quest for vengeance. But even in the midst of the turmoil, a part of me refused to be defined by Hudson's actions. I was determined to forge a new path, one that would allow me to not only heal, but also to help others who found themselves in similar situations. That's when the opportunity to work with a local nonprofit organization focused on empowering women presented itself. It was a chance to take my own experiences and channel them into something positive, a way to ensure that no one would have to endure the pain and heartbreak I had faced alone. "This is perfect for you, Carice," Grant enthused when I shared the news. "You've been through hell, but now you can use that to help others find their strength." With his unwavering support and the encouragement of my close friends, I dove headfirst into the work, pouring my heart and soul into advocating for those who had been wronged, betrayed, and cast aside. It wasn't easy, of course. There were days when the memories of Hudson's deceit would come flooding back, threatening to overwhelm me with a tidal wave of anger and sadness. But each time I felt myself slipping, I found strength in the stories of the women I worked with, their resilience, their determination to rise above the ashes of their own shattered dreams. Through it all, I couldn't help but wonder about Hudson's own journey. Where had his fall from grace taken him? Was he still clinging to the delusions of grandeur that had fueled his downward spiral, or had the weight of his actions finally broken through his arrogance? The answers came in sporadic bursts, whispers, and rumors that filtered through the grapevine. He had been forced to downsize, selling off his lavish possessions and moving into a modest apartment. Job prospects were scarce, his reputation forever tarnished by the scandal he had brought upon himself. A part of me felt a twinge of pity for the man I had once loved, but that fleeting emotion was quickly eclipsed by a sense of justice. Hudson was finally reaping the consequences he had sown, a bitter harvest of his own making. As for me, I found solace in the knowledge that I had emerged from the darkness stronger, more resilient, and with a renewed sense of purpose. The scars of Hudson's betrayal would never fully heal, but they had become a part of my narrative, a testament to the trials I had endured and overcome. And as I looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism and hope. The road ahead would undoubtedly be paved with challenges, but I knew that I had the strength and the support system to navigate them, one step at a time. In the end, Hudson's legacy would be one of cautionary tale, a reminder of the insidious nature of unchecked ambition and the consequences that awaited those who dared to cross the lines of loyalty and trust. But my story, I hoped, would be one of resilience, of rising from the ashes of betrayal and forging a new path, one that would inspire and empower others to find their own strength in the face of adversity. And as I looked back on the journey that had brought me to this point, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not just for the justice I had served, but for the person I had become in the process. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I was no longer a victim, but a survivor, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead with a newfound sense of purpose and resolve.